Hello dear participant, we are in SWAYAM course. Course title is Introductory Animal Physiology. Module name is Reproductive Physiology of Female. Reproductive cycles in farm animals we will be talking about today in this topic. Hi, I am Dr. Manish Kumar, Assistant Professor in the Department of Veterinary Physiology and Biochemistry, Faculty of Veterinary and Animal Science, Institute of Agricultural Science, RGC, BHU. Overview of this class is estrus cycle, sign of estrus cycle in the different animals, endocrine control of estrus cycle, factor influencing the estrus cycle, and postpartum ovarian activity in the farm animals. So, if you say that what is the estrus cycle? The term estrus cycle refers to the rhythmic phenomenon observed in all mammalian involving the regular but limited period of sexual receptivity, that is called as estrus, that occurs at interval characteristics of the species. Estrus cycle defined as a interval as the time from onset of one period of sexual receptivity to the next. The estrus cycle can be divided into several stages according to the behavioral or ovarian changes takes place in the animals. The estrus, first is estrus, second is metiestrus, third is diestrus, and fourth is proestrus. Estrus is the time of sexual receptivity in the female. It is also called as heat. Ovulation usually but not always occurs at the end of estrus cycle or at the end of estrus. Metiestrus, it is early post-ovulatory period during which CL begins to develop. Diestrus, it is a period of mature luteal activity which begins about 4 days after the ovulation and ends with the regression of the CL. Proestrus is the period of beginning after CL regression and ending the onset of the estrus. Based on the changes occurring in the ovary, estrus cycle consists of two phases, that is a follicular phase and second one is luteal phase. Follicular phase is known as proliferative or estrogenic phase because in this development of ova will be taking place, follicles will be taking place, and then more estrogen will be there during this phase, and this includes the proestrus and estrus phase. This is called as follicular phase. And luteal phase is a secretory phase in which the corpus luteum formation will take place and fertilization will take place, embryo development will take place, and progesterone secretion from the CL will be takes place. This includes the metiestrus and diestrus. Proestrus is the period of rapid follicular growth under the gonadotrophin stimulation and the period in which CL form previous cycle in polyestrus species regresses. The follicle growth occurs through a small, medium and large size follicle and influenced by the GnRH, FSH and LH. In this phase, estrogen concentration increases progressively with the simultaneous decline in the progesterone level. There is marked increase in the growth of the epithelial tissue secretion of the mucus and of the vascularity of the endometrium and the vaginal mucosa. In cow, mare, a clear, transparent, stringy mucus discharge at the late in the proestrus period can be seen. Proestrus is not clinically evident in most domestic species and lasts only 2 to 3 days, in which proestrus lasts for 7 to 9 days and is clearly identifiable by well-defined changes in the external genitalia and behavioral signs due to the increasing sexual excitement. The increased endometrial vascularity is characterized by the bleeding in the dog. Vulva become increasing edematous and swollen. there is increased secretion of the viscid, slimy mucus from the goblet cells of the cervix, anterior vagina from the uterine gland. Estrus, it is a period of sexual receptivity, or it is also called as heat. In this period, mating and ovulation is taking place. A Graafian follicle is a large and mature. Ovum undergoes certain maturation changes. The increasing level of estrogen produced by the synergistic effect of the theca and granulosa cells, inhibin and increasing level of estrogen secreted from the Graafian follicle inhibit the hypothalamic and pituitary gonadotropin secretion, thus inhibits the FSH release by the negative feedback effect. Increased level of estrogen stimulates the hypothalamic LHRH release by positive feedback mechanism, thus ovulatory LH surge before ovulation takes place. The uterus is erect, turgid and edematous. The blood supply to the uterus is increased. Vagina, vulva and cervical mucus is pink and congested due to increased vascularity. Mucus secretions is greatly increased. A string of mucus hang from the vulva of the cow form a pattern of discharge. In most species, ovulation occurs towards the end of this period of estrus. Duration of the estrus varies 14 to 18 hours in the cow, 7 to 10 days in the mare and bitches. Other external signs: mounting, bellowing, frequent urination, discharges from the vagina, reduced feed intake and milk yield will be seen during the estrus cycle. In cow, what are the signs of estrus? If you will see that what we have told, like restlessness, off feed, discharge from the vulva, congested vulva will be swollen, animal will allow the other animal mates to mount, it will stand to be mounted by the male. These are the major signs of estrus in the cow. Here in the picture you can see very clearly that in estrus cow, this is the string of mucus, this one is being secreted from the vulva of the cow. Now, signs of estrus in the mare. The onset of the puberty in the mare occurs during the breeding season after birth. If the interval between the birth and the next breeding season is a short, the summer birth puberty can be delayed for 12 months. The transition from the winter estrus to the estrus in the late winter or early spring is often erratic, in that follicles might be grown but not ovulated. This results in prolonged estrus period. After the first ovulation, the length of estrus cycle stabilizes and the duration of the estrus is around 5 to 6 days. Ovulation occurs about 24 hours before the end of estrus in the mare. Signs of estrus in the mare are elevation of the tail, standing with the hind legs apart, squatting and urinating, rhythmically erecting the clitoris is the most reliable sign of estrus in case of the mare. Now, sign of estrus in the eaves. The physiologic breeding season lasts 6 to 7 months, during which repeated estrus cycles observed in the absence of pregnancy. A prominent sign of estrus is a fluttering of the tail and wagging of the tail, that the tail moves laterally in case of the sheep. A female separated from the male by a barrier often assume a close proximity to the barrier. The vulva is slightly swollen, congested, and there is often slight discharge of the clear mucus you will find from the vulva of the sheep. Estrus is stand when mounted by the ram. This is the most easily noticed sign of estrus in case of the eaves. Sign of estrus in the doe, that is a goat. Estrus does restless. Again, there will be continuous belting sound, that vocalization sound will be there. They will wagging of the tail will be there. Here that in the doe, the wagging of the tail will be left and right, and up and down will be the most reliable sign for the stress. Again, the congestion of the vulva, swelling of the vulva, it can be easily seen. There will be reduced feed intake, reduced milk yield. Sometimes they will rub their back to the male and they will allow the male to mount. Sign of stress in the sow, swelling of the vulva, restlessness and decreased appetite will be the general sign of the stress in case of the sow. Application of the pressure on the sow back during the stress elicit the rigidity reflex that occurs during the natural mating with the boar. Ovulation occurs from both ovaries and around 14 to 16 oocytes can be released in a one time. Because of the large number of the follicle or corpora lutea at any one time, sow ovaries is often appears to be lobulated. Sign of stress in the bitch. The stages of the stress cycle are different from those of the other species in that each is longer. The proestrus and estrus are each around 7 to 10 days long in the case of bitch, and diestrus is prolonged, lasting around 70 to 80 days in case of the bitch. The LH surge occurs at the end of proestrus, followed by ovulation in 24 to 48 hours. The bitch might be sexually attractive during the proestrus but not sexually receptive until after the LH surge. Progesterone secretions thereafter is essential for receptivity, and although the estrogen level declines, sexual receptivity is maintained for 7 to 10 days. So, in the case of bitch, the proestrus and diestrus will be 7 to 10 days, and the sexual receptivity in the dog will be around 7 to 10 days. Vaginal cytologic changes are predominant in the case of bitch. Vaginal cytology can be smeared and seen under the microscope. It can be assumed that exactly in which phase of estrus cycle that particular bitch is. The principal cytologic changes are thickening and cornification of the vaginal epithelium, loss of leukocytes because of the thickened epithelium, and appearance of erythrocytes from the developing vascular system of the endometrium. Among those animals that show the pseudopregnancy, it is the most often seen in the bitch. The absence of pregnancy in the CL persists, and during the exaggerated diestrus, progesterone continues to be produced for 50 to 80 days. This is normal phenomena in bitch because the uterus is not active in CL regression. That is, it is not the uterus of the bitch is not producing the PGF2 alpha. The endometrium hypertrophy and endometrial gland development, although no fetus is present, will be taking place. Some bitches have no other signs of the prolonged elevation of the progesterone concentration, but others have the mammary gland enlargement and relaxation of the pelvis. Occasionally, maternal attitude develops that leads to the nest building, and rarely lactation begins and the bitch shows the sign of labor. This is in case of pseudopregnancy. If the queen does not have the coitus, ovulation does not occur because they are induced ovulator, and no luteal phase intervenes until the next cycle. However, 8 days follicle phase is followed by the 8 days period of ovarian inactivity. If queens have the coital contact but fail to conceive, a luteal phase prolongs onset of the next proestrus within minimum time of 42 days between the estrus. Pseudopregnancy occurs in queens if a luteal phase occurs without the pregnancy. Development of the uterus, mammary gland and abdomen is not as marked as in case of the bitch. The nest building and lactation seldom occurs. Sign of stress in the queen: it will increase affection with any object like legs of the chair, other piece of the furniture, and also crawl their throat against the floor, roll about, and vocalize for the prolonged period. Several coital contact might be made with the intromission and ejaculation occupying around 10 to 15 seconds each time. Refractory period or lack of sexual receptivity occurs 10 to 15 minutes after each intermission. During the first hour of the contact, 4 or 5 intermissions or ejaculations might occur in case of the queen. Coming to the next stage of the estrus cycle, that is the metiestrus. In this metiestrus, that ovulation has taken place in the estrus phase. Now the formation of the corpus luteum will take place and production of the progesterone will start. So it is a transitional period between the ovulation and full development of corpus luteum. During this period, the reproductive system switches from the estrogen dominance to the progesterone dominance. It is the post-ovulatory phase during which granulosa and theca cells lining the ruptured follicles begins to grow and recognize into the structure called the corpus luteum hemorrhagicum. Cl grows rapidly from the granulosa cells of the ruptured follicle under the influence of the LH of the anterior pituitary. Metiestrum is largely under the influence of the progesterone produced by the corpus luteum. Progesterone, by inhibiting the secretion of the FSH by the pituitary gland, prevents the development of more Graafian follicle. In cow, during the early part of the metiestrum, the epithelium over the caruncles of the uterus is a very hyperemic and some capillary hemorrhage may occur, and this is called as post-estral or metiestral bleeding. In the case of the cow, it is due to the withdrawal of the estrogen. In the species cow, sheep, sow and mare, the length of metiestrus is about equal to the time it takes for the ova to reach to the uterus, around 3 to 4 days. In the dog and cat, the pseudo-pregnant period may last about 50 to 60 days and 30 to 40 days respectively, when the Cl regresses and the anistrum of varying length occurs. Now coming to the diestrus. Diestrus is the longest period of estrus cycle. In this, fully mature Cl has been formed and full concentration of progesterone is being produced. Endometrial secretion increases, endometrial glands growth increases, and it is making ready for the embryo to be implanted in the uterus. So in this period, Cl is fully developed, actively functional, and the reproductive organs are under the dominant influence of the progesterone for the preparation of the uterus for implantation of the zygote and its growth as a fetus. LH is required for the maintenance of the Cl in the domestic animal. In rodent, prolactin is a luteinotrophic hormone. The endometrium becomes thicker and glands hypertrophy takes place. Cervix is constricted and vaginal mucus is scanty and sticky. Coming to the diestrus phase, the mucous membrane of the vagina is pale, uterine muscles is relaxed. Late in this period, corpus luteum begins to show the regression. The endometrium and its glands atrophy or regresses in size. In species that are not polyestrous, anistrum may occur. In the non-gravid uterus, PGF2 alpha is produced and it passes into the uterine vein, transferred to the ovarian artery and reach the Cl by countercurrent exchange. In cow, mare, sow, ewes and doe, PGF2 alpha is a natural leucolytic agent. This is the some points which you need to remember, like when that onset of the puberty it is taking place, how long it takes place, is at first service, means when we can breed the animals, length of estrus in each animal, different animal, what is the length of estrus days, and length of the estrus means heat period, when that what period animal will be receptive, and then gestation period, how long the animal have the gestation period in the different animal, and then time of ovulation, at what times that animal ovulate, and the optimum time for service, at what time if you will do the service, that conception rate will be higher, chance of conception rate will be higher, and advisable time to breed after the parturition, means if animal has parturated, at what interval again we will be able to breed those animals. And anistrus. Anistrus is the stage of the sexual quiescence characterized by the lack of estrous behavior. Anistrus is a normal stage of reproductive functions in the prepubertal and in the aged animal of all species. Pregnancy is the most common cause of anistrum in the polystress species. In a seasonally polystress species, during the non-breeding season is the main cause for the anistrus. During the lactation in the females, anistrus takes place. In all domestic species, anistrus may occur as a pathological condition caused by the variety of factors that influences the reproductive tract of the animals. Coming to the endocrine control of the estrous cycle. Estrous cycle is regulated by the hormone from the hypothalamus, anterior pituitary and the ovary. The pulsatile release of the GnRH, that is a gonadotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, regulates the release of the FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary. FSH and LH are secreted continuously by the adenohypophysis throughout the estrous cycle, but the proportion and the level of each changes during the different stages of the estrous cycle. FSH promotes the follicular growth and maturation, while synergistic effect of FSH and LH is essential for the synthesis of the estrogen from the granulosa cells. Increased level of estrogen in the blood induces the estrous behavior, whereas estrogen and inhibin from the Graafian follicle inhibit the FSH release from the anterior pituitary through a negative feedback mechanism. Estrogen favors the LH surge from the adenohypophysis via the positive feedback mechanism by increasing the sensitivity of anterior pituitary to the GnRH. A large surge of LH and a small surge of FSH synergistically act to initiate the ovulation. Immediately after ovulation, the concentration of estrogen declines. LH activates the formation and maintenance of corpus luteum in most of the domestic animals. Progesterone increases rapidly during the mid-luteal phase, inhibits the FSH and LH, thus the follicular growth. In non-pregnant animal, PGF2 alpha released in a late luteal phase causes the lysis of Cl. Following the luteolysis, progesterone decreases and GnRH, that is gonadotropin level, increases, initiate the another cycle. If animal is conceived, progesterone production continued by the corpus luteum, which inhibits the follicular growth, ovulation by negative feedback effect on FSH and LH. What are the factors influencing the estrous cycle? That is, there are several factors which influences the estrous cycle, means how it will be. Like photoperiod, in the seasonal breeders, light is a potent stimulatory or inhibitory factors in regulating the estrous cycle. The light acts through the hypothalamus and pineal gland. Melatonin is secreted by the pineal gland during the darkness. When the daylight period is decreased, with the increasing darkness, melatonin secretion is increased. This increased melatonin initiates breeding season in seasonal breeder like sheep and goat. In horse and cat, an increasing photoperiod initiates the breeding activity, which may be due to an inhibitory effect of melatonin on GnRH secretion. Factor like temperature, it greatly influences the estrous cycle. If temperature is too high, animal will not come into the estrus regularly. If at all animal is coming into the heat, animal will not be showing all the signs of estrus properly. There may be silent heat will be there. Cold generally does not affect the estrus in the animal. Nutrition, low level of nutrition always affect the estrus. If the nutrition supply is not there or not proper to the animal may not be regularly cycling, or animal may not come into the heat regularly, or may not ovulate. If at all it comes into the heat, the follicles grow, but it may not ovulate and it regresses. So increasing the energy content of the diet from the suboptimal to optimal level, especially before the onset of breeding season, increase the ovulation rate in the pigs, goat and sheep that ovulate more than one ova, and this is called as flushing. Then pheromones. The pheromones are the chemical that allow the communication between the animals of the same species. The pheromones modify the behavior of the male of the same species. Vaginal odors of the females attract the males. Methyl p-hydroxybenzoate of the vaginal secretion of the dog during the proestrus and estrus attract the males. So, because of this, you would have seen that in breeding season, male dog will be able to sense from the very long distance, even it can sense 2 km, 3 km also, that some female is in heat, and that male dog will come and they will run behind the female dog in estrus. Sows assume the breeding stance when exposed to the urine of the boar. Boar odor or boar taint is due to the pheromones, that is androgen 5-alpha androsterone. Social factor, that rearing the female in a larger group facilitate the puberty at the early. If that animal is reared in the separately, that puberty will be delayed. Transporting the prepubertal animal for a short distance will enhance the estrus activity quickly. It is due to the mild stress on the female. Presence of the male in the flock intensify the estrus sign. Pseudopregnancy. Pseudopregnancy, it is also called as false pregnancy and can be defined as an exaggerated diestral response in the beach and rodents. Pseudopregnancy means animal will not be pregnant, but animal will behave, act, and their reproductive organs will feel that, or they will develop that endometrium or their mammary gland as though that animal is pregnant. So this generally you will be seeing in the beach, that is in dog or rodents. Related to the extreme sensitivity of the endometrium and mammary gland to the progesterone in association with the other hormonal factor including the prolactin, corpora lutea of the non-pregnant bitch remain functional for an extended period after ovulation. The uterus enlarges, abdomen becomes relaxed, mammary gland begins to develop in preparation for the lactation. There is relaxation of the pelvic external genitalia similar to the symptoms observed during the pregnancy. Pseudopregnancy often lasts as longer than the normal pregnancy. Postpartum estrus. The duration of the postpartum estrus is affected by the various factors: genetic, physiologic, breed, nutrition, suckling rate, and uterine involution hormone etc. Time required for the postpartum uterine involution is around 4 to 6 weeks. Sow exhibit estrus within 48 hours after the parturition without ovulation. In a mare, there is a fertile estrus 1 to 3 weeks after the parturition, which is called as foal heat, and the mare can be bred in the foal heat. So this is the fertile heat. In cow, ewes and goat, silent ovulations occurs 2 to 3 weeks after the parturition, but fertile estrus returns later. Suckling increases the prolactin release, and that which inversely related to the FSH and LH release. In the cat, if mating does not occur, Graafian follicle regresses and new follicles develops. Postpartum ovarian activity. The pituitary is refractory for the short duration following the parturition because of the continuous negative feedback effect on the high progesterone secreted by the corpus luteum and placenta and estrogen from the placenta in the late pregnancy. There is no gonadotrophin secretions during this refractory period. In cattle, the concentration of the FSH rises within 3 to 5 days after parturition, whereas restoration of the LH pulse and LH surge mechanism takes a rather longer period than FSH. It is around 14 to 28 days it takes place. Significant rise in the FSH concentration associated with the emergence of the follicular waves. However, none of the growing follicles become mature enough to ovulate due to very low LH pulse frequency and ultimately become the atretic and then regresses. The process of the follicular growth and regression occurs over and again till the restoration of the LH pulse. After restoration LH pulse, the growth and development of the follicles are normal and one or more follicle ovulate depending upon the species. Whether or not ovulation occurs depends on the size of the dominant follicle. That is, if more than 1 centimeter in the cattle, the LH pulse frequency about 1 per hour and bioavailability of insulin or insulin-like growth factor and their binding proteins are there, then ovulation takes place. After ovulation, there is a luteal phase which may be normal, return to the estrus in 18 to 14 days or shorter, that is less than 14 days. The shorter phase is probably due to the premature release of the PGF2 from the uterus. Most of the first postpartum ovulation is not associated with the behavioral signs of the estrus because CNS require prior exposure to the progesterone to elicit the behavioral signs of estrus in the cow. So, in this, what we have covered? We have covered the estrus cycle, in that different phases of estrus cycle and different signs of estrus in the domestic animal, and then hormone which regulates the estrus cycle. Thank you.